Okay, so welcome back to the next panel in the symposium this morning. What we want to do in this next session is to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing over the past year in the MIRRA Plus project, and to present some of the results and some of the future considerations to you. So I'm going to speak a little bit first about the context and the research background. Then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Pete Williams to talk about the knowledge exchange workshops. And then our colleague Tanya Marchant will talk about app development testing and present the app to you. And Anna Sexton will talk a little bit about some future considerations. So that's the plan for the next little while. As before, if you've got any questions, queries or so on, do please put them in the chat as we go along so that we can pick them up. Okay, so just to say a little bit then about the context and the research background. So child social care records are a vital resource, as we've heard already, for memory making and identity for adults who were in care as children. And the MIRRA project worked with care experienced adults in England to try to understand their experiences of accessing their care records, focusing on the needs of care experienced people to access their own files. And that's why you've heard a little bit already this morning about some individual experiences of that process. MIRRA mapped the complex legislative, regulatory and practical challenges in the creation and management of children's social care records held by voluntary and public sectors in England, which need to be tackled to enable care experienced people to exercise their access rights to information about their own childhoods, and to ensure that public authorities understand their rights and obligations under data protection. The MIRRA research was co-produced with a group of 11 care experienced adults and our community partner, the Care Leavers Association, which is the most active peer support network for care leavers in the UK. And the research drew upon qualitative data from over 80 further research participants. Some of MIRRA's key findings included these. First, that care experienced people of all ages often have a deficit of self-knowledge about their childhood, which impacts on their identity and sense of self. Many care leavers turn to their care files, organisational records of out-of-home care, for answers. Accessing records has life-changing impacts for them, positive and negative. However, care leavers often lack guidance about how to access their records and don't receive the emotional and practical support that they need. A second finding was that social care records often reinforce information inequalities. They lack personal memory objects and rarely include life story work. Instead, records are designed to fulfill legal, legislative and professional requirements of the care provider. None of our contributors felt that their voices or versions of events had been captured in their file. Thirdly, records management across public and private sectors is inconsistent, and in many cases, paper and digital records are incomplete, inaccurate, lost or destroyed. Information professionals have limited resources, sometimes have poor physical and intellectual control of records, and may lack adequate training. Next, the legislative and regulatory landscape for record keeping is fragmented, making it difficult for care leavers to exercise their information rights and for information and social care practitioners to understand their responsibilities. Critically, when information is redacted or removed from the records, redaction was risk-averse, inconsistent, and rarely explained. And you've heard this morning about the effect of redaction on the care leaver receiving their records. Digital record systems marketed for social care recording tend to constrain the changes which participants want to make. Systems place control of the record with social care and information governance professionals, They're generally not designed to facilitate access and participation by the care leaver. So the first MIRRA project research demonstrated the need for participatory record-keeping practices. For care-experienced individuals, greater control of records relating to their out-of-home care play an enduring therapeutic role in resolving issues of identity and self-image. The recent UK independent review of children's social care, The Case for Change, found that care experience carries stigma and can weaken identity, and that accessing care files can play a role in the lifelong memory and identity needs of care experienced people. For social care practitioners, the adoption of person-centred participatory recording helps to fulfil policy objectives for child-centred approaches. For example, the British Association of Social Workers' Top Tips Recording in Children's Social Work cited MIRRA's research to explain why it is important to capture children's voices in their records, and proposes practices that will improve child social workers' ability to record reflective, person-centred records efficiently. Information governance practitioners who reframe child social care recording as a caring activity rather than as a bureaucratic necessity would be better able to navigate key legislative requirements such as the Data Protection Act 2018 in socially just ways. MIRRA's work shaped the design and provided the content for a new web resource, Family Connect, created in 2020 by Family Action, a charity that provides practical, emotional and financial support to disadvantaged families across the UK. Family Connect provides support and expert guidance for the 4,000 care leavers who seek access to their care files annually. Julia Feast, who will talk about this resource tomorrow, has described the website as a unique source of help and advice for the care experience community. We were very pleased that Family Connect won the 2020 UCL Public Engagement Community Prize. MIRRA also produced a set of principles and a toolkit that outlines an approach to record keeping that focuses on the rights and needs of care experienced people at every stage. This framework establishes the benchmark for care-informed record-keeping practice, and it recommends that records should be co-created by all those involved in a child's care. They should be orientated towards the perspective of the child and young person so that their voice is centralised and included. Recording should be seen as a critical form of direct work, taking into account an individual's lifelong needs for memory, identity and information. Participatory approaches such as co-production and shared custody should be used to ensure that care experienced people's information rights are explicit, well understood by all involved and respected. 45 principles cover the steps needed in creating, managing and accessing records, including policies and resources, approaches to participatory recording and information sharing, physical intellectual control of records for retention and preservation, advice on handling subject access requests, redaction, and the kinds of support needed by care experienced people accessing their records. These all grow from the first principle, which is that care experienced people, children, young people, and adult care leavers of any age should be able to participate in every stage of child social care record keeping if they choose, including the creation of records while they're in care, the management of records during the period of retention, and the provision of access to records at any stage of life. We're hoping to publish the principles soon. However, and importantly today, they were used to underpin the second MIRRA project. So MIRRA Plus built on the findings of the first project, and we worked in partnership with OLM Systems, a leading social care systems developer with 30 years of experience in child social care. OLM perceived a synergy between the findings of our research and their ambition to develop a participatory record-keeping system, and said that MIRRA research has confirmed our experience that record-keeping for care leavers should be collective and participatory. So we aim to develop a specification for a participatory digital record-keeping system which can be developed for use in child social care settings in the UK. And the project was inspired by the Open Notes model, a social justice movement founded on the basis of open source software that allows medical practitioners to share and collaborate on their notes with patients. The ambition of the MIRRA Plus project is to create a specification to act as proof of concept for the development of software that will serve the needs of the child social care community. So I'm now going to hand over to my colleagues who will talk about how we went about the work through knowledge exchange workshops, developing the problem statement, writing software requirements and user testing, and then at the end, towards the end, some thoughts on next steps and future considerations. So it's my pleasure now to hand over to Pete Williams.
Okay, so good morning from me to everybody. And before I start, just to say that so many people that are attending this conference, whose names are recognised, and in some cases whose faces are recognised, although only on screen, who have been incredibly supportive and helpful. So I just want to say thank you to all of those people. It's been a real pleasure working on the project and working with you all. So that said, let's proceed to the next slide, please, as Chris Whitty might say. So first of all, the knowledge exchange workshops, getting knowledge from people in particular who have had care experience or who work with people who are care experienced. So this first slide, as you can see, what and why, okay? What's the point? We had a MIRRA project from 2017 or 18, I think, to 2019, where we heard the testimony of lots of people such as John, George and Linda in care, who were care experienced, and we kind of knew the terrain. So what's the point of having these knowledge exchange? Well, first of all, I personally wasn't involved in MIRRA 1. I was working on something else. So it was very new to me. Also, our colleagues at OLM were new to the project as well. So one aim of the knowledge exchange was as a general introduction for us and to introduce ourselves to the people who were involved previously on the project. And in that sense, despite the remote nature of the workshops, it wrote really well. The second reason was to act as the context within which the participatory record system specification, or if I may call it app from now on, which is a bit less of a mouthful, would sit. So it provided the context for us. What aspects of these experiences would be relevant, applicable to put into this system we were creating that would provide a better voice for people in care? And finally, it elicited people's requirements for that system. What did they want out of it? And why and how did they think it would work? So for all those reasons, it was very valuable indeed to have these workshops at the start of this phase of the project. Okay, next one. Okay, so how do we manage to avoid the repetition of MIRRA 1 and not simply ask people to regurgitate experiences and thoughts for the benefit of myself and for OLM? Well, you can just about see, I hope, on the left of the screen, a list. These are a list of the 45 principles which Elizabeth spoke about earlier. And as you can see, don't worry, I won't read them all. But what we did was to use these 45 principles as a basis for the discussions. However, we didn't use all of them. We cut down the 45 to the 20 that we felt were most applicable with regard to the development of the app. And I'll give you two examples. So one that we removed because it didn't really have any relevance was records should avoid jargon, unexplained acronyms, etc. We removed that, not just because it's difficult to say, but because the record keeping system in itself can't control what you actually write. Although, of course, if it's participatory, the people about whom the record is created and with whom the record is created do have a bigger voice. So it does kind of help to solve that. But nevertheless, we removed that one from consideration. However, we kept in this one. Records should be indexed, organized and stored in ways that enable quick discovery. Well, there's a direct relevance to the app. So we took these 20 principles that we taken from the 45, and we asked people to think very carefully about their top 3 or 4 priorities within these 20. And on the right there, you can see, unsurprisingly, we did it via good old Zoom for obvious reasons. Yeah, next slide, please. Okay, so I deliberately made this slide very complicated so that everybody would be completely impressed by it. I hope you can see that actually. It's very, very small on my screen. But basically we had 2 workshops, and the attendees at one of the workshops were those we classified as requesters. So those were the people who had been in care, who wished to find, wished to access their records and had made requests. And the other workshop was with deliverers. So people like social workers and information professionals who were able to facilitate the access to the records. So we had these 2 groups, and we, prior to the workshops, we sent them both the 20 principles we asked them to consider. And when the workshops start and to choose their top 3, as I mentioned, and at the start of the workshop, we asked them to vote on like an electronic board, which I'll show you in later, to vote for the 3. And we could then see what were the priorities. During the workshop, people discussed why they had chosen which principles were most important to them, why they hadn't chosen others, and also, which we thought was very important, why, how they felt when they were undertaking this process. What was going through their mind when they were making these choices as to what was more important than any other. Of course, as came up in the workshop itself, in one sense, they were all important because they all related to the better treatment of people who were care experienced and for the facilitation of access to their records and for the record creation to be more participatory. So in one sense, they were all important. So it's actually a very, very difficult task that they had to try and prioritize. And although I've got here priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, we didn't actually ask them to rank the priorities. We just asked them to choose 3, or it might have been 4 actually, but the top ones in any case that they felt really were very, very, very important. At the end of the discussion, we asked them if they'd changed their minds or what other things they might have taken into consideration, etc., etc. And we finished up with a kind of overview of the priorities of each group with which we could then work in the development of the app specification. Okay, next slide, please, Elizabeth. Okay, so what did we find? So I won't spend very much time on this because we've heard it all before, in a sense. So in the discussion element of the workshops, one of the most important things in both of them actually was redaction. And we heard some stories, which I think had been heard in MIRRA 1 as well, of, for example, party invitations where the person inviting had been blanked out. So you couldn't remember who it was, whose party was that I went to. The name was blanked out, that kind of thing. And people receiving their records with, you know, half of it blacked out as if it was some sort of MI5 report that had been redacted for the press or something. And of course, this practice doesn't help people in their quest for what happened when they were younger, why they were taken into care. It doesn't help with their memory, and it can actually exacerbate the problems that they might have hoped could be resolved by access to their records. So very, very important aspect of being looking for your records. Okay, the next one was access itself, which was very, very difficult. In some cases, people had to go through lots of administrative hoops, even though they had the right of access. Oh, sorry, I just want to say one more thing about redaction. So the deliverers also were frustrated by the fact that A, they had to redact, and B, how there wasn't enough training for people in terms of what they should redact and what they should retain, and how flexible the law was, etc. So both sides, both of the workshops and both of these different stakeholders had similar views on this, and on everything actually. And finally, the contents. John George, who's actually sitting in the same room as me now, made a famous quote, which was something like, he didn't see his own voice, or he didn't read his own voice until something like page 52 of the record he was presented with. His own voice was almost entirely absent from his care record. So clearly, this highlights the need for participatory design and for participatory practices. And you'll hear a lot more about that later from some of the other speakers. So those are the issues around which the discussion kind of coalesced. And if we move to the next slide, here, and I don't expect you to be able to read this. In fact, I'm cheating because I've got the most important ones just written down by my side. But basically, this is the dot voting. So as you can see, it's a this was OLM, by the way. So thank you very much to our colleagues in OLM for this initiative, as was using the record keeping principles, to be honest. As you can see, so you can't see actually, but each one of those squares is a different principle, and the dots are the votes, obviously, and you can see them where they're grouped around specific principles. Now, one thing that we could have done had we been working with different data, possibly, was to try and group each square in terms of some kind of similarity, so that we could have a much better kind of almost like a heat map. But basically, these are all kind of discrete principles. So although, as you can see on the left-hand one, the deliverers dot voting, they're all coalesced around the top row, but I think that's just a coincidence. But basically, from that dot voting, the most important things that came out were the inclusion of sentimental items, which obviously can be facilitated by participatory system. The issue of redaction, not surprisingly, participatory record keeping, bracket the need for, which is also not surprising, and so-called creative record keeping. Those were the four main principles that came out of this dot voting element. So I don't know if Elizabeth wants to speak, but it's now the turn of our OLM colleagues to say how they work with this data to create a really amazing app specification for us. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Pete. So we're going to hand over now to Tanya Marchant, and I think Tanya has her own slides to share.
Yeah, although
Great.
I'm regretting that.
Okay, good luck.
We changed that. So thank you, Pete. And I'm just going to carry on with the project of what we did next after we did the voting. So let me just see if this will work. Okay, great. So taking on that we'd made people made a very difficult decision, as Pete had said, with the voting. Just really from a technical point of view, the reason we do that is because we have to start with something and we can't deliver everything, especially within quite a tight deadline that we were working against. So it is a difficult decision, but one that's better achieved if you do involve the people that are the people that were experienced in the care levers and experienced that would be a representation of and an understanding of the kind of people that would use the application that we were looking to build a specification for. So it was hard for them, but it was really vital that they helped us on that journey. So we thank them for that. Once we have that, and we then can work on our next stage, which is to create a problem statement. This helps us clearly define goals of the project, outlines of the project, the scope. It makes sure that at every step of decision making we make, we can base that upon the problem statement, that it guides us in our activities and our decision making when we come to decide what the app will do, how the app will do it. And so this was the next workshop that UCL and OLM did together, again via the powers of Zoom for reasons we all know. So I'm just going to explain what the problem statement is for those that might not have heard of this before. So first of all, we always define who is affected by the problem. So who's having the problem, who's going to benefit from our solution, what do we know about them, what can we learn about them, what can we be aware about their situation when we're building the solution for them. Next, we define what is it about. So what is the problem? Is it easy to explain? Is it an actual real life problem? What evidence do we have? And we work through that. The third part of the problem statement is the where and when does it occur? And this gives us context of the persona that's experienced the problem. It helps us clearly explain the context. And we also question, have we got proof of the problem happening in a certain context or space? Again, awareness of where and when it happens helps us make decisions about what the application should and shouldn't do. And finally, we ask why. And hearing all your stories and having the knowledge exchange, this is sometimes the easiest of the problem statements to define. You know, what's the important value for the user? What's the pain points this solution should help get rid of? You know, why is this problem important? Again, remembering that this is a statement that helps us make decisions on the project. So we defined it, and the problem we agreed was that the who was going to be looked after children between the ages of 13 to 18-year-olds. And we chose this group because when you're designing technology, the groups in which, and the style and tone and the user experience and the interfaces that you use changed dramatically. So we felt like we needed to focus on a smaller group of age range children. What was the problem that they were experiencing, and it was quite clear that they didn't have the tools, maybe they didn't have the experience or the opportunity to express themselves. You know, their voice is very powerful, but how do they do that, and how does that then get into their record? And the where and the when. they needed to be able to explain their feelings, what's happening to them, what's important to them at that point, because it's important of capture at that point, and to build their life stories. And the why, as I say, quite easy for us to refine, but very prominent in decision making about how our tool worked. It was important to children looked after, 13 to 18, because it gave them the autonomy and control over their life story, and it enabled them to talk for themselves. So as you can see, it's quite a long problem statement. It's not a catchy line, but it is something we all agreed on. And although at the beginning caused us a few difficulties because we were then involving minors in the project, it really did resonate with all of us that this would be something that would be good to solve. So we internally at OLM, we then worked with that problem statement. We brought in a specific designer, and another UX colleague of mine worked with me. We looked at defining the personas of a person. So this really, again, just helps us make decisions and make sure the app we've got some context for the app. So we designed a persona for a young lad called Sam, age 14, who'd been in long-term care, and we mapped out his motivations, what his wants and needs were, what his pain points were and frustration points were. We then mapped out an average day for Sam. This helps us see what digital points there were, what opportunities there might be for the app to help him, what the app could help him write if he doesn't have the experience, what it could tag onto on normally happens on his day. And through that, we worked through product ideas and features and mock-ups, and making sure that the product ideas aligned with the overall problem, and really focusing on the autonomy and control that we wanted the app to give to the child to be able to create their own voice and have their voice heard and recorded. So we designed and we built a prototype. Now, this is where I'm just a little bit nervous of swapping over. So I'm going to swap to show you the app. Okay. I'm hoping that's sharing.
Yes, that's good.
No, hold on. It's not the right one. One second. Okay. So hopefully you can see the app. Elizabeth, can you just confirm you can see me clicking on the app?
Yes, that's great. We can see it really well.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So I'm going to show you the demo of the prototype, and I'm going to talk you through Sam using the app. So Sam has this on his device. It could be a mobile, it could be an iPad. It can actually be used on a laptop. It's responsive in that way. And once Sam's connected to the app, when he opens the app, at any point that he opens the app, it will try to prompt him to see if he would want to record how he feels. And the idea of this was about, really capturing how you feel, negative or positive, but really trying to help the young people make a contribution to record how they feel, to initialize them using the app. We made it very focused on emotions, and as you can see here, Sam's being asked how he feels, and actually today, for this purposes, Sam feels happy. So I'm going to select that, and he feels quite calm. So I'm going to select that. Now, Sam can actually write some words if he wants to, or simply post the emojis. And Sam can skip at the top here. So none of this is mandatory, not wanting to make this feel, I think somebody mentioned earlier, like work, like homework, just something that can be it can be used. So Sam then pressed post, and that, as you can see there, appeared at the top of his journal, just marked with a date stamp, and Sam can go in there and change that if he wanted to, or amend it, etc. So now Sam is in actually the main part of the app. It's very simple in its presentation to keep the focus for children, and so what Sam will want to do next, what we thought was important for people, was to be able to search, so to be able to go back and look at posts that they've posted. So you can do this by scrolling, as you can see, and it's all in date order. You can also use the calendar at the top, so click here. You can see there's some dates and some information of when he's posted. And for this particular one, I'm looking for the post I made about my family or Sam made about his family on the 14th of March. Click on the 14th of March, you can see that that post is then displayed in the lower half of the screen. Because not one size fits all, and because we try to accommodate the app, we can search in different ways. At the top, there is a search bar, which you can put in some text if you wanted to. So if it's about my friends, I type friends and the friends post come up. You can see the 14th of March is here, but there's another one also. So the other way that I can search is via this icon here, which is for tagging. And if I click on that, I'm presented with a various selection of tags, and I click on friends, then I can see the post related to friends, and there again is the post from the 14th of March that I was actually trying to look for. We then can go and look at how we add a post. So we've got the first instance when we come on, but Sam can also at any point click the add button. And here we'll be presented with some options. So really, one of the focuses we picked up on the problem statement was the fact that some of these individual children might not have the experience of knowing what to write. A blank piece of paper can often be very daunting for all of us, but especially if you're trying to record as a child. So this will be presented to anybody that clicks, any child that clicks on the ad. The top section is focused on what kind of post you want to make. So if you want to write something, if you want to upload a voice recording, and so on. One of the things we picked up on, like I say, was this blank page. So at the lower half is what we call smart suggestions, and these would be developed over time and would be presented in a way that picked up what Sam most liked to use. So if he most liked to use random surprise me as a template, that would appear at the top, so it would perform in that way. But for this demonstration, Sam's going to pick the template 3 good things for today. And when I open it, you'll see that it gives Sam some pointers about what to write, you know, really helping them and frame them with what they can write. But at any time, Sam can choose to change that. It doesn't have to. It's just an idea. It's just a helpful hint, a helpful suggestion. So Sam can write text in here. And then at the top, we've got various options. And these I'll go through now. So like I say, Sam can anytime change this. He can add in a picture if he wants to. He can change it to a list. He can add different prompts. We've also got the ability to customize, and this is just something that we picked up on, being able to have the control so the app can behave how Sam wants it to behave, and he can add coloured backgrounds if that was a thing. He can add his own backgrounds, just so that it gives them that level of control and autonomy that we wanted the app to enforce. Having chosen the colour background, having written the post, I can then tag it. So this was a way of finding, so we created these tags. Now, they will be populated, the vision would be they would be populated with some that could be used or not used, but also that the individual could actually create their own tags, so they can again have that control and autonomy. So I can click on the Friends tab. And lastly, it was very important that this app was the child's app, but at any particular point, Sam could choose to share this particular post with his social worker if he wanted to, and that would be by this mechanism here. But as you can see, by default, it's all private, and that was very important for us that it was that way around. Once Sam's written his post, he can then click post, and it will appear at the top 3 good things. You'll also see at the top that there's been a little reward, and Sam has earned 20 stars. This, we felt, was important that the app did this reward mechanism in order to help the individual and keep the individual wanting to use the app. We haven't scoped out the full remit of what these rewards would achieve, but they would be along the lines of gaining more ability to customize, so being able to add, and we'll come on to the customization section in a moment, and I'll explain a little bit more about how these points can help in that area. So now if we go to the profile page, we'll see that here you can see the rewards again here. So the achievements that happened, the parrot that just happened a moment ago is now in a darker color, and the total amount of points that Sam has been awarded has been 65. So he has a recognition here. And if we go to customization, here we have just a small sample of what would be available for Sam to upload. So they'd be able to change avatar, be able to change their display name, the app's colors, being able to change that is important. And these are all baseline what the app will provide. But as Sam gains more and more points, then the available options will grow and the abilities of what he can do. Specifically around the mood icons. So the mood icons at the bottom here were the ones that were presented. You know, we would want the child to actually choose what kind of mood icons they want. As you can do in most apps, and upload your own kind of icons that you can use and that are important to you. That is the end of the demonstration. So I'm just going to stop sharing just now, and I'm just going to finish my bit of the section with the testing feedback that we did. Okay, so generally when we demoed this to the co-researchers and to UCL, we've had very positive feedback. We also were able to contact a care leaver in the age bracket and went through some usability testing. And this is where we ask the individual to actually use the app. So we give them a scenario: can you find the post that you made on the 14th of March? And they, without any help or assistance, are then left to see and observed in the way that they use the app. And this makes sure that we have a good user experience, that the app is easy for them to use. At the same time, we take on any feedback that they might have about the app. And it's really important that actually the participants of this usability testing fit exactly the profile of the people that are going to use this app. Because whilst we all might be able to contribute with feedback, and it's all very important, you know, my feedback, it's not as important as the participants, because I'm not going to use the app and I'm not a child in care. So that's why we really do focus on that. And we were really grateful for UCL working very hard in order for us to approach people. And it was incredibly difficult in the timeframes and with the current situation. So I know that Pete did an astounding job, and we were very grateful for that opportunity. The remarks from the usability testing were, like I say, almost all positive. The candidate had no problem using the app. There was not a problem with the usability of the app. Positive feedbacks were that the app allowed a lot of autonomy, and the customization was a real nice and really well welcomed part of the feature of the app. And also the fact that the app did not ask the candidate for their gender on the profile page. Quite a small thing, but for children of this generation, being defined by gender would have in the candidate, in the participant's own words, she said that it would have put it would put children off downloading the app if they were asked their age. They liked the fact that the app steered away from any kind of social work terminology or homework or approach, felt more like a nurture, felt more like the kind of thing that they would engage with. So, like I say, we've got co-researchers and UCL to give us the feedback as well. And all of the feedback in all of its detail and raw entry data is in the report that will come out at the end of this project. So I know that Anna's going to now take over with regards to next steps. So it's back to Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Tanya, and thank you to you and your colleagues for all the absolutely amazing work that you did to create the app specification. It was inspirational to see you work, and it was so wonderful to be able to work with you and see such a great outcome for the project. So I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, it was absolutely, and I know Mark's on the call, our pleasure. And being involved in this has been a real pleasure for OLM. My colleagues would all echo that. So thank you for the opportunity.
No. It's been a brilliant collaboration, and I'm really, really happy we were able to do it. So I'm just going to go back now to Anna, who's going to talk about future considerations, and I will just share my screen for Anna. Okay,
Great.
over to you.
Elizabeth, that's lovely. So I just wanted to talk through the kinds of considerations that we're thinking about in trying to move on to the next step. So moving from the prototype that OLM developed into a functioning app. So what sort of things do we need to consider in order for that transition to happen? So next slide, please, Elizabeth. So we can kind of broadly take these considerations and frame them around 3 areas, which is content, sharing of data and storage. And I'm just going to take each of those in turn now and just offer a few thoughts. So firstly, thinking about content, the nature and creation of content is obviously of huge importance for adopters of the app, especially if it's to be used as we envisage as forming part of the child's care record, at least as far as that is desired by the young person themselves. So there are 2 major considerations that may be required around content. The first is that of the extent to which, if at all, content would need to be moderated by an adult for safety or privacy reasons. And there are several issues regarding the uploading of personal photos or other more personal content. So these include the safety of the care experienced individual in sharing photos and personal content about themselves, and also the safety and privacy of third parties who might be represented in that content. And there are considerations both in compliance with GDPR, but also just in terms of a general sensitivity to the possible impacts on other people. So the sorts of things that we're thinking about are what guidelines might need to be drawn up to ensure that content that is shared is appropriate, what, if any, gatekeeping measures might need to come into play. And one potential gatekeeping measure would be content moderation. But if content was moderated, does that compromise the idea of autonomous youth-led contributions, or is a degree of moderation necessary for safeguarding? Is there a case to be made for facilitators who may be the carer or the social worker in taking a role in practicing a form of maybe facilitated autonomy, where they support the young person in using the application? And that really takes on to discussion about the contribution of other parties, the extent to which, if at all, the young person and their carer or support worker could co-create an entry. And that would be a matter for each party to consider carefully. There may be young people, of course, who would zealously guard against any additional content from others, and some who may not even wish any of their entries to form part of their record. Others may not only enjoy co-creation, but permit others to upload content and show it to the young person for approval and retention. Such content might be something as simple as a photo of a school event or a party invitation. It could also be complementary or contrasting accounts from both the young person and their carer of a particular event. So here the carer's contribution would act not only as their own voice, but offer them the right to reply in the case of a disputed narrative. Another level of co-creation might be the joint composition of an entry. For example, if the young person wished to write about a particular outing, but was not sure how to start or what to say, the carer or other adult could be an assistant or facilitator helping to construct the text, but mindful of its ownership by the young person. If undertaken with sensitivity and respect for the young person, any form of co-creation could prove to be a useful and mutually beneficial focus of conversation. So this participatory approach fits very well with initiatives such as Me and My World, and that's a model for communication between professional support workers and children that has been developed by Rebecca Watts and others for use across Brighton and Hove City Council, and you'll hear a little bit more about that later. The Me and My World approach is essentially about making children's social care records more participatory. So in that model, professionals involved wrote directly to the child, and that encouraged a simple, direct writing style with less jargon and acronyms. And in addition, foster carers were encouraged to write a letter every 6 months to highlight kind of magic moments in family life and key experiences for the child and any worries and help that needed to be given. And we can imagine that both of these activities could be undertaken collaboratively with the child, using the app as the medium of expression and making use of the multimedia possibilities. So now moving on to issues around data sharing and data control. The app is designed for the young person to have both input and some control over the content of their record, and this aspect raises the issue of data ownership and access rights. The app specification allows the young person to either share individual posts with their caseworker, although the full app may be configured to permit wider sharing, or keep them private. Logically, only shared posts would become part of the formal care record, but the extent to which this would be automatic or also subject to the choice of the young person may be an issue for negotiation or policy. In relation to record storage, the participatory record-keeping principles that have come out of the first stage of MIRRA make a number of recommendations around managing records, including around records retention, suggesting that the retention of records should reflect their potential lifelong value over and above the minimum legal retention period. So we have suggested that records of looked after children should be retained for at least 100 years from birth, in line with the retention of adoption files. And records relating to children in need and any other records relating to children and young people should be retained for 100 years where they involve social care intervention analogous to being looked after. And that photographs and any personal documents which may relate to a care experienced person should also be kept for at least 100 years, even when they are not associated with a case record. So if this was applied to content generated through the app, then consideration would need to be given to what to do if the young person, on reflection, a few weeks, months, or even years later, decided that they wished to delete some of their own contribution. One possibility to address this issue might be to operate a system whereby a post the young person wishes to add to their record is designated originally as provisional, for a certain time period, and at the end of that the young person would then decide whether to retain it as part of the record. And this ties in with the right of amendment or the right to be forgotten. So data subjects have the right to have personal data erased in the UK, known as the right to erasure, and this is one of the provisions of the UK General Data Protection Regulation. If the request relates to data collected from children, as would be the case with the app, there is greater emphasis on this right, reflecting the enhanced protection of children's information, especially in online environments under GDPR. So there are issues around storage that need to be resolved as we move from a prototype into a fully functioning app. So that's what I wanted to say at this point about future considerations. So I will hand back to Elizabeth at this point.
That's great. Thank you so much, Anna. So you can see that whilst we've made lots of progress, there are also more issues for us to have a think about as we take all this work forward in the future. We have published quite a bit from the first project. You won't be able to take all this in, but we can share the slides afterwards. But I wanted to just draw your attention to the various open access publications, the project blog, which has more or less all the resources on, and some research in practice publications as well. So I'm going to come back to the main screen then now. So thanks so much to my colleagues for the presentation. I hope that you will have understood now a little bit about what we've been doing for the last year, how we've gone about the development of the follow-on project for MIRRA Plus, and seen the results of the work. We will take a break. I just before the next panel, I just wanted to respond to one point that's been put in the chat. There are lots of comments and questions in there, and I will try and pick some of them up later. So thank you all for your contributions. There is a question about the ethical protocols, and I can assure you that we spent a lot of time on the ethical protocols, not least because, to start with, we under the UCL research ethics and integrity processes, which is the whole university wide, and we can, if you're interested, take you through all the multiple layers and details of the gatekeepers, the guardians, the young people respondents, but that there was a long and very complicated process of ethical review and requirements, which I don't have time to explain in detail, but I'm happy to do so if anyone would be particularly interested in that. Somebody says, what's the name of the app? Well, it doesn't have a name at the moment, so that's a very good question. Okay, so I think we should stop there.